There are places where the past refuses to stay dead, where the walls hold on to the final agonizing breaths of the people who died inside them. When my fiancé and I moved into a rental home with a dark history, everyone told me I was being paranoid. But when you're left completely alone in a house where 2 people recently died, you quickly realize that some warnings aren't just in your head, and whatever is watching you from the dark has no intention of letting you leave. Back in 2023, I experienced a series of events so deeply unnerving that they permanently altered how I live my life. Before that summer, I was never particularly fond of staying home alone, but ever since that weekend, I have not spent a single night anywhere by myself. My fiancé Ryan and I were actively searching for a house to purchase because our apartment lease was coming to an end, and we didn't want to lock ourselves into another full year of renting. Out of nowhere, an opportunity landed in our laps. One of my dad's oldest friends owned a home in a beautiful neighborhood nearby that had suddenly become available. The previous tenants had passed away, leaving the house vacant. Because of his close bond with my father, the owner offered us a month-to-month arrangement at a heavily discounted rate, telling us we could stay as long as we needed while house hunting. It completely eliminated our immediate financial stress. However, a persistent dark cloud hung over the deal for me. I was deeply uncomfortable with the thought of moving into a house where both previous residents had died within weeks of each other, right inside the building. They were elderly, so it wasn't a violent crime scene, but the heavy history still weighed on me. Ryan, on the other hand, didn't care in the slightest. He was focused entirely on the savings and scoffed at the idea of bad energy or lingering spirits. During our first few days there, he would mock my anxiety, even making fake ghost noises just to get a reaction out of me. Ryan is a loving, good-natured guy, but he has a habit of pushing jokes too far until you put your foot down. When we moved in, the entire house was covered in an ugly, stained tan carpet. The owner promised to have it torn up and replaced with hardwood, which was a huge relief. But in the middle of the living room, there was one particularly massive, dark stain that caught our attention. On our very first day, Ryan asked the owner where that specific stain came from. The answer was something I wish I had never heard. The elderly woman had suffered a tragic fall, striking her head against an end table, and the stain was from her blood. She was taken to the hospital that night and never returned. Just weeks prior to her fall, her husband had suffered a fatal heart attack down in the basement. Knowing someone had died in the basement and another had bled on the living room floor made me sick to my stomach. But financial reality won out. Within 2 days, workers arrived, ripped out the old carpet, and gave the walls a fresh coat of paint. Those cosmetic changes, combined with a newly installed security system that chimed front door open every time an entry point opened, helped me start to relax. As annoying as that robotic voice was, it provided a sense of safety. A little over a month into our stay, Ryan prepared to leave for the weekend for his bachelor party. I felt a lingering restlessness about being completely alone for 2 nights, but the house felt settled, and I had our cattle dog, Rex, to keep me company. On Friday, July 7th, I kissed Ryan goodbye before leaving for work at 7 a.m., knowing he would be heading out shortly after and wouldn't return until Sunday afternoon. When I got home that evening, an inexplicable heavy feeling hung in the air. I tried to dismiss it as basic anxiety. I ordered Thai food, turned on my favorite comfort show, The Office, and settled onto the couch with Rex. Around midnight, a strange sound echoed up from the basement stairs. I tried telling myself it was just an old house settling, but then Rex bolted to the basement door and began to bark frantically. Rex was a quiet, protective dog who rarely barked. He usually only howled. His posture was completely rigid, filled with intense tension. I slowly stepped toward the basement door, turned on the overhead light, and cracked it open. Rex immediately dropped his bark into a low, deep growl. I hesitated on the threshold, intending to look down, but the memory of the previous tenant dying at the bottom of those stairs paralyzed me. It was pitch black down there. I held up my phone to snap a photo into the darkness, but the flash couldn't penetrate the shadows. Terror completely seized me. I pulled the door shut, locked it, and hurried into the bedroom. Rex eventually followed, but instead of settling down, he stood guard at the foot of the bed, his eyes locked onto the bedroom doorway for the rest of the night. Sleep was almost impossible that night. Every creak of the floorboards felt like an intruder approaching the room. Morning light finally broke, and I made coffee, determined to shake off the panic from the night before. I decided to focus on house chores to distract myself. I gathered a basket of laundry and walked down the hall to the utility room. The moment I stepped inside, my heart stopped. The heavy washing machine was pulled out several feet away from the wall, sitting almost dead center in the middle of the room. This wasn't a minor vibration shift from a spin cycle. The unit had been moved intentionally. Panic sent me running out of the room. When I finally mustered the courage to go back in, I inspected it closely. Nothing was disconnected or broken, but moving that heavy machine back into place required immense physical effort. There was no way it could have slid that far silently. I called Ryan and explained everything. He was naturally skeptical, searching for logical explanations, but he could hear the genuine terror in my voice. Sensing my distress, he promised to leave his trip early the next morning. Saturday night played out much like the first. I tried to stay calm, watching television with Rex by my side. Then, at 9:18 p.m., a massive, booming shockwave echoed from outside the house, so loud it sounded like an explosion right in our driveway. Seconds later, my phone vibrated with a motion alert from the garage camera. I opened the live feed and froze. The garage door, which we never opened because we only used the space for storage, was standing wide open. Bright flashes of light flickered across the driveway on the camera video, accompanied by harsh popping sounds that resembled heavy fireworks. I cautiously opened the door connecting the house to the garage and peered outside, but the driveway was completely dark and entirely empty. There were no firework casings, no smoke, and no sign of anyone out there. I manually closed the garage door, secured the locks, and retreated back to the bedroom. My pulse was racing uncontrollably. I couldn't tell if I was dealing with a malicious prankster or something far more unnerving. I checked the security system 3 separate times before attempting to sleep, while Rex resumed his watchful post at the foot of the bed, growling softly into the darkness. At 3:39 in the morning, I was jarred awake by violent, relentless pounding on the front door. It wasn't a casual knock, it was a furious, continuous battering. Paralyzed by fear, I couldn't even force myself out of bed. Suddenly, the security system's automated voice echoed through the hallway. "Front door open." Someone had just stepped into the house. I scrambled out of bed, slammed the bedroom door shut, and turned the lock just as my cell phone screen went pitch black and refused to respond. Tears streamed down my face as I watched the brass doorknob to my bedroom slowly begin to rattle and shake. I screamed at the top of my lungs, "Go away!" When my phone finally rebooted, I frantically dialed emergency services. Officers arrived quickly, but when they searched the property, they found the front door resting wide open with no signs of forced entry, no missing items, and no intruder in sight. They dismissed the garage incident as neighborhood kids with fireworks and suggested the dead-bolted front door had simply been blown open by the wind. The explanation made no sense on a humid July night, but I was too exhausted to argue. As dawn broke, I packed Rex into the car and drove straight to my parents' house. We stayed at that rental property for 2 more months until our new home was ready. And though nothing else ever happened, those 3 days left a permanent mark on me. While that house left me terrified of the unexplainable, sometimes the real world produces situations that are far more disturbing. Years ago, I lived in an apartment right next door to a local bar, and I absolutely hated it. A dense line of trees wrapped around the property line, giving me a modest amount of privacy, but if you stood at a specific angle in my driveway, you had a clear, direct view of the side patio, where patrons constantly gathered to smoke and drink. Most nights were manageable, but on weekends or game nights, the noise was unbearable. Since I worked retail at the time, I was usually trying to sleep early for weekend shifts, while the crowd outside was partying until the early morning hours. Out of all the frustrating nights living there, one particular evening stands out, a night that still haunts me. It was a Saturday, and my childhood best friend, Ela, came over to make dinner and hang out before her girlfriend finished work. Ela was like a sister to me, and during this period of my life, she was actively trying to act as my wingman. I've always been an awkward homebody who loves comic books, collectibles, and quiet nights inside, which made traditional dating nearly impossible. The idea of walking up to a stranger in public terrified me. Around 10 p.m., Ila's girlfriend called to say she was off work. I walked Ila out to her car, said goodbye, and watched her pull away. As I turned back toward my front porch, loud laughter burst from the bar's smoking area. I glanced over and noticed a group of 7 or 8 women drinking and talking loudly. As I made eye contact with the crowd, I noticed one woman standing slightly apart from the rest. She was staring directly at me. I hesitated, looking around to see if she meant someone else, but there was no one else nearby. As the rest of the group headed back inside, she stayed behind and began waving at me aggressively. Hesitantly, I gave a brief wave back. She responded by blowing a kiss in my direction. Assuming she was just intoxicated, I offered a polite smile and went back inside to play video games. At 1:30 a.m., a gentle knock sounded at my front door. Living next to a bar, unwanted visitors weren't entirely uncommon, but it was still jarring. I paused my game, walked to the door, and peeked out the side window. No one was on the porch. I figured someone was just messing around and returned to my living room. About 15 minutes later, I decided to check out the window one more time. The porch was still empty, but something caught my eye in the driveway. The interior dome light of my car was on, and the driver's side door was sitting resting slightly ajar. Annoyed by what I assumed was another attempted vehicle break-in, I grabbed my keys, walked outside, and checked the back seat to make sure no one was inside. Finding the car empty, I shut the door, locked it, and went back inside. The moment I locked my front door, a heavy, sweet scent hit me. It was a distinct lavender perfume hanging thick in the air of my hallway. I assumed the smell had drifted in from whoever had knocked on the porch earlier, so I brushed it off, turned off my console, and went to bed. I was drifting off to sleep when a faint sound pulled me back to full awareness. I muted the television and listened. Rapid, light footsteps were pacing back and forth in the hallway, right outside my bedroom. Then came a soft, feminine giggle. Terror gripped me. I quietly reached over, pulled my bedroom door shut, locked it, and immediately called the police to report an active home invasion. Every second waiting for help felt like an eternity. Eventually, the footsteps stopped. Arming myself with a golf club from my closet, I stepped out into the hallway and crept toward the kitchen. Standing near the window was a small blonde woman in a tattered pink dress, the same woman from the bar. Without turning around, she whispered into the darkness, "Hey buddy, I know you're there." Suddenly, she spun around and sprinted directly at me. I dove into the bathroom, slammed the door, and held the lock shut while she pounded on the wood, begging me to let her in. Minutes later, police officers entered the house. When I emerged from the bathroom, the woman was gone, but resting on the floor right outside the door was a heavy steak knife from my kitchen. She had slipped in through the front door during the brief moment I went outside to check my car. That experience taught me that danger often comes from real people, but my final story proved that sometimes the threat is already living inside your walls. I've always been a private person who preferred living alone, using my solitude to build a successful career as an interior designer. But after purchasing my dream home, strange things began to happen. I started hearing a distinct shuffling sound coming from above my office. At first, I assumed it was squirrels in the roof, but late one night, while lying in bed, the noise returned, accompanied by the faint sound of heavy human breathing directly above my ceiling. Realizing my home had a small, forgotten crawl space directly over my bedroom, I pulled down the access ladder and poked my head up into the pitch-black attic. Seeing only support beams, I quickly shut the hatch and went downstairs to distract myself on the couch. As I dozed off, the sound of a creaking door startled me awake. I crept upstairs to find the crawl space string swaying gently and my bedroom door standing slightly open. I stepped into the room and noticed a small clump of dirt on the floor beside my bed. Kneeling down to inspect it, I heard that same rasping breath right next to me. I lowered my head to the floor and looked under the bed. Lying flat on his stomach, staring directly into my eyes, was a middle-aged man. Before I could move, he smiled and said, "Hi, Julie, it's okay." I screamed, scrambled to my feet, and bolted out of the house to dial the police from my car. When officers arrived, the man had fled, but they found empty water bottles and a pillow hidden behind the beams in my crawl space. He had been living above my head for weeks, watching my every move. Whether dealing with spirits, intruders, or hidden strangers, one thing is certain: locking your front door doesn't always keep you safe.